public comment if we can. So I want to call on Governor Eugene Herrera from Cochise Pueblo. Governor?
Commissioners, I'm Governor Herrera from Pueblo de Cochise.
Governor, are you speaking to the mic, sir?
I'm Governor Herrera from Pueblo de Cochise, and I have this letter from the chairman of the All Indian Pueblo Council, which was convened earlier this evening. Dear Chairman Chapman and Commissioners Holden, Rhodes, Block, Hale, and Eichwald, on behalf of the Pueblos of Acoma, Cochise, Laguna, Hayden, Sandita, San Felipe, Santa Ana, Santa Clara, Santo Domingo, and Zeta, and with the support of all Pueblo Council of Governors and a coalition of the 6 Middle Rio Grande Pueblos, we write to express our collective concerns regarding the proposed Sandoval County oil and gas ordinance, both the amended and the starter versions. Based on the concerns we identified below, the Pueblos urge the Commission to table this agenda item until there has been a full and considered consultation with the Pueblos and Indian tribes in the Sandoval County in order to establish and incorporate language into the proposed amended oil and gas ordinance and the proposed starter oil and gas ordinance that recognizes and provides adequate protections of tribal interests and resources. As you are aware, each of the after-mentioned Pueblos has lands within the Sandoval County. Total, the Pueblos, the Navajo Nation, and the Jicarilla Apache Nation comprise approximately 15% of the county's population and nearly half of the county's land base. It was recently relayed by our respective tribal governors to Chairman Chapman in a meeting called by the tribal governors that the Pueblos have used and continue to use surface and groundwaters within Sandoval County since time immemorial and have an enduring obligation to their people to protect the natural resources for future generations. To the Pueblos, the water and surrounding natural resources are an integral part of our Pueblo culture and tradition. Thus, without adequate protections in place in the proposed ordinances, our Pueblo way of life is threatened. To date, there has been no consultation with tribal governments on the proposed ordinances, and each version of the ordinance makes no mention of Pueblos and tribes. Furthermore, the proposed ordinances contain no process for intertribal coordination for addressing issues such as emergency response, integration of tribal water quality standards, or even setbacks for protection of cultural sites. This is a significant oversight and one with enormous potential negative consequences for communities. As you know, water resources have no political boundaries. This means that whatever one county or tribal government allows can affect others in this basin. Thus, it is everyone's duty, including the Pueblos and the Sandoval County, to ensure that there is proper consultation and coordination in place to keep our communities and natural resources protected. Furthermore, the Pueblos understand that the Commission is inclined to approve one of the 2 proposed ordinances in January, with the idea that any fixes can be addressed later by amendment. However, the issues identified above are too critical to be after-the-fact fixes, especially when it comes to oil and gas development planning or permitting due to the nature of any permanent consequences. The governors encourage the Commission to be proactive in incorporating the Pueblos' concerns into the proposed ordinances and not move so hastily to publish and to approve a proposed ordinance without consulting the Pueblos and providing adequate protections. While the Pueblo understands the county's desire for economic development, such development must be in concert with the sustainability of communities and our shared but limited water resources and not threaten the sovereign interests of the Pueblos and tribes within its boundaries. For the sake of our communities, the Pueblos sincerely hope the Commission will take our concerns seriously and table the ordinances on its December 14, 2017 Commission meeting agenda. Signed, E. Paul Torres, Chairman of the All Pueblo Council of Governors, on the behalf of the Pueblos of Acoma, Cochiti, Jemez, Laguna, Sandia, San Felipe, Santa Ana, Santa Clara, Santo Domingo, and Zia. Thank you very much, sirs, for listening to us.
Thank you, Governor. Governor, while you're here, I want to express my gratitude to all of the governors and their staff that joined us for lunch Monday at Santa Ana Pueblo. I thought the meeting represented a new beginning for relationship between Sandoval County government and the sovereign nations of Sandoval County as well as adjoining counties. I was dismayed, to be honest with you, that Governor Everett Chavez didn't join us that day, but I respect the idea of an elk hunt. But nevertheless, I thought it was a good meeting. The feedback that I've gotten from Roger Frawa told me that we move things forward. And as you might recall, we proposed in that meeting that going forward, Sandoval County and the sovereign nations in Sandoval County should make it a point to have a continued meeting process. And I think it was proposed that we would meet at least twice a year to catch up, get to know each other better, and discuss those things of mutual interest. So I hope we can put that together. And we will. I think Commissioner Nyquil and I are committed to making that happen, and so we will continue to move forward in that regard. The same concerns that you just read in your letter were pretty much things that were expressed during that meeting. And I think there was a consensus, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was an agreement from folks in the room that Sandoval County and the sovereign nations shared in the responsibility of kind of where we are today, in that there seems to be this perceived disconnect, and I'll be the first one to agree that it's more than just perception. There may well be, but going forward is what I'm thinking about, and we're committed to trying to make that happen. And so I thank you for being here tonight. I thank you for your comments. We certainly respect the concerns of the sovereign nations in Sandoval County and the surrounding area. We do think about those things as we try to conduct our own business. Finally, I'd like to sum up by saying that Governor Montoya, I think, the host of our meeting on Monday of Santa Ana Pueblo, summarized the meeting at the end, you might recall, by saying that he respected the fact that the Sandoval County Commission has a responsibility to the citizens of all of Sandoval County in terms of governing. And so we're doing our very best, sir, in that regard to govern, do it responsibly, and also be respectful of the sovereign nations of Sandoval County at the same time. So going forward, I feel like the meeting that we had Monday was a good jumping off point for future meetings and future discussions. As you know, having the meeting at Santa Ana Pueblo was a good place because there's a lot of interaction between Santa Ana Pueblo and Sandoval County. We brought our fire chief to the meeting simply because he's had a lot of interactions with Santa Ana Pueblo, collaborating on everything from our fire station that we have located on your lands and other items. And of course, we're going to support Santa Ana Pueblo when that new hotel opens in terms of response and so on and so forth for emergency services. So we're happy to collaborate and cooperate. I want to thank you again, sir, for coming tonight. And we're taking your concerns at heart, sir. At the same time, we're recognizing our duty to govern and be representative of everyone that works and lives in Sandoval County. And I know you respect that as we respect you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing us to speak, sir.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on to our next speaker, and that is Blas Falcone. You happen to live in my neighborhood, sir.
I do. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. First, I'd like to identify myself. My name is Blas Falcone, and I'm a Vietnam veteran, served in the Marine Corps. Can you hear me? Vietnam veteran, combat veteran, served in the Marine Corps. And the reason I want to say that first and foremost is I think it's important for veterans to find their voice, and when they do speak, that their words are heard. So I want to make a couple of comments that I think that these meetings don't really provide an adequate venue for the entire community. And when you don't have a forum that accommodates everyone, you disenfranchise the public. The use of the Socorro Tech, Commissioner, if I could have your attention when I'm speaking.
Yes, sir.
The use of using Socorro Tech to do the study, I think, is also a conflict of interest in terms of it's a mining school. We're talking about, really supporting the interests of the oil and gas versus the rank and file residents of the entire Sandoval community. So I think it's a lot like asking the Fox to participate in making the rules for the henhouse action. The commission, I think, when you heard the open comments from the Cochiti people, I think they needed to be included at the initial policy-making process, not included, afterwards. So I thought that was a little disingenuous on your part. I've been a resident of this community since 1986, and I think that the proposed insurance indemnity of $5 million is inadequate to cover myself or any other residents, much less the water and air quality. If you've heard these comments before, you haven't heard them from me. I did not buy a home to live here in Rio Rancho to subsidize oil and gas. Okay, I'm here tonight to talk about protecting, my children, grandchildren, and I don't want to rush to judgment on an ordinance that is confusing at best tonight, and really risk, the possible earthquake, air quality, and water pollution. So I ask you to table this ordinance until we can have, a really genuine participation of all the parties concerned, not after the fact. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Falcone. For Mr. Falcone's benefit, I would like to respond to some of the issues that you brought up. I know you haven't been to a lot of our meetings.
Actually, I've tried to come to several of your meetings, but I was locked out by the sheriff's deputies because of the lack of adequate venue. And I know you've been requested on at least 4 different occasions to
yes, sir.
have a larger.
And I want to respond to that
Sure.
because I'm sure there's other people in the room who would like a response to that. So a couple of things that we do here at Sandoval County that kind of sets us apart from everybody else is access. And what I mean by that is we videotape and broadcast our meetings live. It's a transparency thing that I fought for on the commission a number of years ago, and I'm glad we were finally able to get it done. If we move our meetings anywhere else, that goes away. We lose our ability to broadcast and videotape and archive our meetings. So that's one issue with moving to another venue. The other issue is security. We cannot provide security for the employees and the staff and the commission at another venue when it's not a Sandoval County building that we're allowed to hold a public meeting in. So that's another issue with going to another venue. Yes, I've been approached by several people who have said, you know, why don't you move it to one of the local stadiums or so on and so forth. But I'll just share with you, the facts are that this room, believe it or not, is as big as any committee hearing room at the state legislature at the Roundhouse. It holds more people than most of those committee rooms do. And so we're providing a venue that's as big as any in the state of New Mexico when you're talking about county government. The other thing that you brought up was the issue of New Mexico Tech and the county engaging that university in our examination of what would be a proper ordinance for regulating the oil and gas industry in Sandoval County. And the reason why we chose New Mexico Tech is because, sir, they are a technical and engineering school. And I think if you look, you'll find the other technical and engineering school in the state of New Mexico is also located in oil country and serves the oil industry, and that would be the San Juan Technical College up in Farmington. So there's a reason why we chose these folks. They're engineers, they're technical, they understand what is a very complex industry, and that's the reason why we chose them, sir, plus access to them.
But it just has an appearance of a conflict.
I understand
And, you know,
that.
we have a Los Alamos Labs just up the road.
Yes, sir, but they're not engaged in this type of work.
Well, they have a lot of scientists who
Of
are.
course they do, but they don't have scientists up there that are involved in the oil and gas industry, sir. They're involved in something totally different.
Well,
So,
actually,
so the point I'm just trying to make, sir, is the reason why we chose them is they are technical in their work, they're technical in their curriculum, and they're in a position to advise on technical issues so that this commission can make an informed decision, regardless of their connection to the oil and gas industry. Also, I would like for Director Springfield, if you would, to come up, because one of the other issues that I'm sure will be brought up again and again and again is this study, this New Mexico Tech study. So you have the man sitting right next to you now, Mr. Falcone, that asked for that study to be done by New Mexico Tech, and there's a really valid reason as to why we asked it to be done. By the way, it's not a study. It's just an assessment, sir, of the available data that's out there, and a lot of it's being provided to us by the oil industry because they're the ones that have it. So, Director Springfield, if you would.
Excuse me, before Mr. Springfield speaks.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Chapman, I
Yes,
have
sir.
a problem as a taxpayer using only a single source when you're gonna spend any more than
Yes.
$2,500 of taxpayer money. And so I think you need to look at, okay, you say that there's only 2 schools or 2 possible vendors that could possibly do this evaluation. I disagree with that. So I think that difference of opinion, we're not gonna convince each other. I just think it has the appearance of impropriety and a conflict of interest.
And you, sir, are entitled to that
Yeah, I
opinion,
mean,
but I
just
want,
like you
I
have
want
the
Director
Mexico
Springfield
Tech
to explain
students
this
say that they don't
assessment.
have employment interests in
I-
this ordinance.
Mr. Falcone, I want to get through this so
Sure.
the other people that signed up for public
And
comment
that's
have
sort
a
of why
chance.
I'm ready to
Okay,
move
sir,
on.
so let's let Director Springfield explain the assessment, why it was ordered, and how it compares to other like assessments that the county has done as a public service over the years. Go ahead, Director.
Yes, sir, if I might. This assessment actually is nothing new for Sandoval County. At the beginning of the year 2000s, we had done a major water assessment for Placitas. That was done by the state of New Mexico for us at a cost of roughly $100,000 for Placitas to try and give the public information about where there were good water supplies, where there were bad water supplies, where you should be careful, and we did that as a public service. We did it for Rio Rancho Estates at over $100,000. I think it was $130,000 to study what the carrying capacity of the development was in the Rio Rancho Estates area. That was used to do the Rio Rancho Estates area plan. Those were both done by consultants. In the work session that we had with the previous county commission, it was important at that meeting from the county commission's standpoint to use New Mexico Tech because it was felt like they were the most unbiased entity that we could use to do a study that
We're supposed to see.
having to do with oil and gas resources as opposed to aquifer resources. You saw some of the maps that Commissioner Heil showed. That's general information that staff has been able to put together to show the disconnect between the two aquifers that we're talking about, where oil production is going on, but we cannot explain why. In the work session in May 2017, we discussed this study, and I read a statement from New Mexico Tech to the Board of County Commissioners for the record, letting you know the progress of where we were and what we were doing with the assessment. It is an assessment, not a study. We're not drilling holes. We're not looking for resource. We are simply assessing the information that's out there with geologists who can give us technical information for public consumption, so people can feel at ease that the information provided is the highest and best information provided.
Mr. Springfield, Mr. Chapman, can I just address your concern real quick, sir? So I've heard this left and right, that New Mexico Tech is in bed with the oil industry. I've heard it all the time. So I emailed Mr. Ron Broadhead, very good man, works at New Mexico Tech. And I asked him this question. I forwarded him an email from a constituent. I just want you to hear it, and I want a lot of people to hear it, because it's really easy to throw out accusations all the time. I get them all the time. Let me finish.
Sure.
He says, Jay, thanks for copying me on that email. And to contradict, I'm not going to mention this person's name, I do not advocate for the oil and gas industries. They have two well-funded professional trade organizations in the state to do that for them. Having started my career in the oil industry, I moved to New Mexico Tech because the job allowed me to pursue applied science and education without sacrificing objectivity. And my position prohibits me, let those words sink in, to pursue applied prohibits me from accepting payment or compensation from any oil company that has any interest in the state. If I wanted to advocate for the oil industry, I would have spent my career in the industry where I would have earned 2.5 to 3 times the salary I bring down working at Tech. And I've worked on topics such as induced seismicity related to oil field operations, and have been firm in a few in rare cases where there seems to be a causal effect. And he goes on to discuss some other technical things I don't need to discuss with you, but my point is that Mr. Broadhead is a man of integrity. He's a public servant. I'm not saying you're not. It's not what I said.
Everybody in this room, why don't we go
I'm telling
that
you
application?
that what I just read to you.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that he's a man of integrity who doesn't accept any money from the industry, and that the county goes to New Mexico Tech because they don't accept money from the industry for objectivity.
What's the impact on this community in terms of the water use that the fracking will develop or require? What's the impact if there's contamination to our water?
I'll answer that later, but I wanted to confront the point, sir, I wanted to confront the point that you made, throwing accusations out against New Mexico Tech for being in the bed of oil and gas industry. They are not. They are not. That's the point you made, and I'm telling you by talking to this guy who's been there, dedicated public servant.
You had representatives of New Mexico Tech, students who are about to graduate, who said they wanted to work in the oil and gas industry and could do so with the provision of this ordinance.
Exactly. Yeah.
They can go
You don't see
anywhere.
a connection there?
That doesn't mean they're in bed with the oil and gas industry because they want to work in the oil and the petroleum industry,
Okay,
sir.
Mr. Block, I guess we have two different perspectives.
Completely.
Yes.
Mr. Broadhead is not in the pockets or does not accept money from the oil and gas industry.
I heard that the first time.
I hope you believe it.
I don't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Falcone.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to chime in, please. Follow on to the dialogue that just took place. three people met with the folks at New Mexico Tech a week ago Monday, and I'd like to read a summary of what those folks conveyed to the folks that visited there. Quote, "The main thrust of the Sandoval County, New Mexico Tech assessment is to determine the oil and gas potential of Sandoval County, including formations which might bear economic quantities of hydrocarbons. Any study related to aquifers will be minimal. Very little funding, time, or resources are being devoted to the study of drinking water aquifers." Let me continue here, folks. New Mexico Tech does not have the time, finances, or individual resources to do a thorough, I repeat again, thorough assessment of aquifers or unconventional drilling operations in parents, horizontal drilling, and fracking. Therefore, the scientific staff is concentrating nearly all of its efforts into the primary mandate, which is an evaluation of oil and gas potential. Now, let me drop back to comments made by Chairman Chapman in June of 2016, and I'm quoting him here. "The bottom line is that we want to make an informed decision. We are thinking about our constituents. It just can't be one facet of the energy spectrum, oil. I know nothing about the Albuquerque Basin. It must be based on data. And we are going to protect our most precious natural resource, particularly groundwater, something the public can sign off on." Let me jump ahead to November 16th of this year. Director Springfield, you noted that, and I'm quoting you, "The point of the study is to try and have New Mexico Tech review well log information." I interpret that to mean strictly oil. Chairman Chapman stated, and I quote, "The study is not a report that is meant to be the basis for this ordinance. If that's the case, why are we messing around with two ordinances?" Thank you.
Commissioner Howell?
I want to address the issue with regard to the Open Meetings Act. I've received several emails on this issue, and I've shared information. I'm going to be brief and just hit the highlights here. So what does the law require? 1, to give reasonable notice to the public. 2, to make a final agenda available to the public 72 hours in advance. 3, allow the public to attend and listen. 4, close the meeting only for certain topics. 5, keep minutes. They go on to answer some specific questions with regard to right to attend, but no right to be heard. However, if you do decide to hear the public, you need to be consistent, and you cannot impose content-based restrictions. We aren't doing that. We certainly aren't doing that. And there is a case out of Albuquerque where the city council was hearing a controversial topic. The public did not all fit in the council chambers, so the city council had an overflow room similar to what we have done, where the public could hear what was going on in the chambers. The court said that was perfectly fine, since the city council was accommodating as many as possible. So we've not only done that in terms of the area down the first floor, but I think we still have the training room on the second floor, or are we just using the first floor? But regardless, we are meeting the requirements of the court. And of course, then it goes on to support what Chairman Chapman said in terms of we would lose our streaming capability if we were to move to another venue. So I just want to make that point that we are more than abiding by the law when it comes to Open Meetings Act.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Heil. I'd like to add a little bit to that. You know, we really pride ourselves here on engaging the public, and when I look around the room and see the familiar faces of people who have been here meeting after meeting after meeting, I would ask them if they thought that the Sandoval County Commission or the commission under my leadership has tried to suppress anybody making public comment. Okay, fine. But what Commissioner Heil didn't say to you, and I would encourage him to say it, but he didn't go that far, but he could have. If you'd like to read it, sir, I think you know what I'm referring to. As it involves legislative matters taken up by county government, and what is the statute in regards to public comment?
The courts have said that the county commissions can put limits on public comments. In fact, quasi-judicial hearings where the due process requirements are even less when it comes to legislative action, the county commission do have even more leeway when it comes to public comment and restricting it. In fact, the chairman could choose to say, we're only going to talk about this for an hour. You can allow whatever number of people can get in an hour. I mean, but we're going way beyond that. So we're not only meeting the requirements of the Open Meeting Act, we're exceeding it in terms of leaving the floor open to as many people who want to talk.
And
just to add a little bit to that, ma'am, you'll have your opportunity.
I'm not on the list because I was waiting downstairs.
But you'll have your opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm not going to keep anybody from having their voice being heard here. Just as Commissioner Heil just alluded to the fact that we try to exceed people's expectations when it comes to engaging the public, and I think we've got a really good record of doing that. So, you know, the reality is, we could limit comment, but we never have and we never will. And I'll just tell you that I served on this commission for 6 years where public comment was reserved for the end of the meeting. So if you can imagine a 3 or 4 hour meeting and you had to wait that long before you could make public comment, that's the way it used to be run here prior to this commission coming into office. So just wanted to share that with you. So let's move on. And I would just like to preface everybody's comments going forward. You've now heard the reason why New Mexico Tech was used for this assessment. You've now heard the reason why we don't move the meeting to a different venue. And you've heard some other reasons as to why we've done the things that we've done. So I would encourage you not to come up and reiterate, you know, why don't you move the meeting somewhere else? Or why don't you wait for the New Mexico Tech assessment? It's meant to be a public service thing. It's not meant to be, the assessment is meant to be a public service to the folks in Sandoval County, not meant to be the basis for the oil and gas ordinance. So as long as everybody just understands that that's how we've gotten here, it's not going to make a bit of difference, Lou, where the geology is. The industry is still going to take the precautions that the industry takes. And they have a very good record, by the way, in the state of New Mexico. I know you're going to disagree with me. I know you're going to disagree with me. So let's move on. Eleanor Bravo. Thank you, Ms. Bravo. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the commission. I'm Eleanor Bravo. I am the Southwest Director of Food and Water Watch. I represent 10,000 members in the state of New Mexico, many of whom live in Sandoval County. I'm not a carpetbagger. I live in Sandoval County. I live in Commissioner Block's district in Corrales and lived in Sandoval County for 25 years. And since New Mexico Tech is not going to be addressing health impacts, I would like to draw your attention to a study which came out yesterday on health impacts of hydraulic fracturing. Researchers examined over 1 million birth records in Pennsylvania and found links between babies' health and fracking proximity. Babies born near hydraulic fracturing sites are 25% more likely to have a low birth weight than those born only a few kilometers away. The new study looked at 1 million births in Pennsylvania's Marcellus Shale region. It analyzed the vital statistics records for more than 1.1 million births in Pennsylvania between 2004 and 2013. It was during that period that fracking took hold across the Marcellus Shale, bringing an economic boom to some communities while also bringing fears about how the process could impact health. The study published Wednesday in the journal Science Advances provides some of the most compelling data to date, linking the process of fracking to negative health effects. It found that babies born within 3 kilometers of fracking sites were less healthy than those born farther away. In some areas, the researchers were actually comparing babies born to the same woman. Of the records examined, 594 of the infants born within 1 kilometer of a fracked well had a sibling who was born before fracking began, allowing the scientists to compare the birth weights among children born to the same mother. Why is this alarming? Because babies born at a low birth weight face a number of risks. The study lists infant mortality, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, asthma, lower test scores, lower schooling attainment, lower earnings, and higher rates of social welfare program participation, among others. Commissioners, are you prepared to subject the people and families of Sandoval County to these and a host of other health risks already associated with hydraulic fracturing? You have a great responsibility to us, to yourselves, and to all of our children to be extremely cautious. Do you want your pregnant wife or your children living near drilling rigs? Many Sandoval County residents are already subjected to these conditions, and most of them are indigenous. These proposed amendments emphasize the intention of the Commission to sacrifice some residents for the benefit of others. Please take these responsibilities very seriously. If you pass this ordinance, whether it's the Heil or the Stoddard, we will never tolerate its endurance. Never. We will ultimately vote you out and repeal it. So do the right thing and table it.
I love your passion, believe me, but let's try and keep it down a little bit.
Oh, come on.
So that we can get through. So that we can get through, sir.
You were talking your bullshit a while ago your way, now let her talk her way.
That's right.
Sir, please, a little civil
Yes,
discourse,
right.
please.
Right.
Please, sir.
Yes.
If you want to stay in the meeting, if you want to stay in the meeting, sir.
I don't give a damn whether I stay or not. I can walk out on my own if I want.
Yeah, please.
I'll walk out.
We need to go back on down.
Let him stay, let him stay.
No, I want to leave. I'm tired of looking at that asshole up there. No. Yeah. And I'm glad you were caught fidgeting. Because you've been fidgeting every time someone gets up there to talk. She was up there talking, you were fidgeting. Not cool it with your...
He wasn't listening, he was looking back at everywhere else.
Every single time the domestic violence.
Elaine Chimino.
I have some things here. So you all get a copy. Good evening. Is this on? Can't hear you. Hello? Is this on? Is that good? Hello? Yeah. Okay. I would like to tell you that you could also hire Mike Swick over here. He live streams, and we can have this held in a venue that
Man,
it
we
has
already
everybody.
covered the venue thing. So
Well, you know, that's just the way
why
it is.
take it
and
up again?
Because you're violated the Open Meetings Act in almost every meeting. The county commissioners, please do
Mr.
not.
Mino, you need to go read the law.
Oh, I have read the law, sir, and we're holding you accountable. The county commissioners, please do not ignore the contamination of our water supply that is this current ordinance allows. I'm attaching a document that also has a geology report that in an IBRA documentation that we received from OCD of 2,280 pages, we have documented your entire history of this ordinance. There are several documents that show that OCD wrote back in the ordinance of fall of 2016. They wrote this ordinance and then proceeded to push the county to streamline it more than the first part of the year. What our discovery shows is how the county planning and this commission has just totally deregulated it and keeps wanting to deregulate. And we're watching you. And any attorney would be a fool to represent this county because this poor woman over here has told you time and time again that you have violated the law on several meetings, and you continue to do so. It's you ignore her. The county has jurisdiction for water well monitoring and has no move to require it. You haven't moved to require well monitoring when you can do so. You have, and when you have that jurisdiction, you have an obligation to us to protect us. And everyone in this room knows that you're not protecting us by this ordinance. The ordinance isn't worth the paper it's written on. And Mr. Heil, your amendments are inadequate. You're throwing us a bone. And I know you're a smarter man than this. And I know you can give us the type of amendments that will protect us. But you won't. And you refuse to even talk to your constituents about this. So, and I'm one of them. The intent of gas plays is moving the drilling south from where the Sand Ridge wells are located into Bernalillo, across the mesa, and without regard to our drinking water for Rio Rancho or the perched aquifers that need protecting for 100,000 residents. However, the rift and the thermal considerations of our perched subbasins and our interconnected aquifers are not being addressed. And that's what really needs to be addressed here. I just think that we are here talking about your amendments, sir, so if you would just please give me a couple more minutes.
Ms. Chimino,
These amendments are
what
highly
about your
inadequate.
fellow citizens that want to address the commission?
And you've been given hydrological information that you have failed to share with the city of Rio Rancho and the counselors that are there.
All right, Ms.
And
Chimino,
I just
thank
think
you.
that you need to protect our water, and you're not protecting our water. You're not having the conversations that need to be had, and that's totally unethical. You need to start protecting us instead of hurting us, because you will harm us.
Ms. Chimino, would you give your fellow citizens a chance, or are you going to take everybody's time?
What I'm going to do is to show you one last
We
thing
got
on
a copy
here.
of your handout.
Yeah, but I want everyone in the room to know that there's a new operator in town in Sandoval County, as of 11/29/17 that's here to drill and to get land leases.
Okay.
And,
right, thank
and
you.
I think that they're lining up. They're lining up to take our water. And our water fracking uses 40%, 46% of the local water.
Ms. Jamino, please don't make me cut you off. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on, please. Stephen Palmer, thank you.
Your arrogance, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We'd rather hear her. Yes.
I'm sure you would. And she's been here many times.
You haven't heard me yet, so
Go ahead.
don't prejudge.
Go ahead, Mr. Palmer. Nobody's prejudging.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Stephen Palmer for Calle Ponderosa Placitas. I'm the noise guy. That is, I'm a professor emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, in psychology and cognitive science, where I taught and did research for more than 40 years on perceptual science. And I'm here to tell you, as an expert on human vision and hearing, that there's a huge difference between 80 decibels and 70 decibels. It might actually have originated as just a typo, but it cannot be treated as one. It would be like President Trump claiming that the 20% tax cut he promised the middle class became a 20% tax hike because of a typo. You can't say that's not a real change. It's a very definite change, a substantive one, and it cannot be swept under the rug as inconsequential. You need to vote on it, you need to republish, and you need to repost. But that's not what I actually came to say today. That was generated by a previous discussion. I want to bring to your attention an additional problem, possibly even worse, with the current draft of the ordinance, the so-called Heil ordinance, that's clearly opposed to the best interests of Sandoval County residents, especially of people living in the so-called rural areas, which is a lot of territory we found out tonight, that is only covered by permissive use regulations. In section 5.6 about noise control, the Heil ordinance says that noise levels shall not exceed 60 decibels as measured from blah, blah, blah for operations requiring notice. Now that's a problem because these seemingly benign words requiring notice, the only ones that require notice are the ones in the populous areas where conditional use requires notice. And that means that your current ordinance specifies absolutely no noise limits in areas of the county that have permissive use. That means that people in these rural areas can be subjected to ear-splitting amounts of noise that could literally deafen them in a matter of weeks or months. And I submit that they would be fully justified in suing Sandoval County and the members of this commission for your failure to protect them from this abuse. There's a second problem that's very much the same. I'm not going to have time to go through it, but it's in section 7.1 about insurance, where it says basically that you only have to provide evidence of insurance prior to commencing your drilling operations if there's a requirement for notice. And what this means is that if you're not required, notice is not required, that you don't have to come up with these insurance policies, at least before the drilling begins. And that means that the county and you guys are going to potentially be causing mishaps that might not be covered by insurance. Both of these problems are examples of what is wrong with this process. It's full speed ahead, throwing caution to the winds, and citizen input be damned. I implore you to stop trying to ram this ordinance through. Take the time to get it right, not only about noise, but about water quality, air quality, truck traffic, emergency services, and so much more. This is too important to screw it up. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Palmer, thank you. Randy, let's stop meeting like this.
Commissioners, Chairman. My name is Randy Erickson. My name is Randy Erickson. I live in Placitas. First thing I want to do is commend the public for doing this kind of stuff that I'm doing. I don't like to do this stuff. I don't ever see myself doing this stuff, but here I am again and again doing this stuff. And I commend everybody else that's taken the time out of their lives to stand up. Second, I want to commend Commissioner Block for what I'm actually going to talk about tonight. I was going to talk about preemption, but this whole decibel thing has preempted that. Director Springfield, when he got up here tonight, said something about administrative mistakes, and he talked about correcting these mistakes back to the original levels that came up from P&Z regarding the decibels and regarding 10.1. 10.1 has to do with non-compliance, and I just want to make sure that in his statement he corrected this, that they took out the erroneous inclusion of the words "at least" in front of the "at least 30 days to comply with the notice." Because if you leave that in, one, it's wrong to do that because it wasn't in there before. But if you did leave that in, that gives anybody, any operator who's non-compliant, it gives the director the opportunity to give an operator who's non-compliant at least 30, but maybe 40, maybe 50, maybe 90, maybe 365 days to comply. That's not what the original ordinance said. Regarding the original, the quote-unquote Stoddard ordinance, what you voted on 9/1, on 9/21, Commissioner Heil offered amendments to that original ordinance, changing the numbering scheme on it, and basically only substantive revision was to 5.12, which concerned water protection. These passed and were put into the resulting subsequent ordinance. From that point on, every document that's come out representing what the current ordinance is has those mistakes, the decibel mistakes and the change in 10.1. including the documents that you got in your packet for tonight. So unless what Director Springfield did tonight somehow allows you to proceed by somehow fixing those mistakes on those documents that were actually published and posted on the website 72 hours prior to this, you're going to be voting on something that still has that stuff in it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Erickson. Donald Howard.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. My name is Donna Dowell, and I am a public health nurse practitioner. I too looked at well, first of all, I submitted a health report, 18 pages with 34 citations, scientific studies on the health effects of oil and gas production. It was submitted to you last month for the commission meeting, and Commissioner Black was kind enough to hand out paper copies. It's also on your website. I hope you've had a chance to read it. If not, please read page 13 with the recommendations, all based on scientific health studies. So many of our health effects from oil and gas can be mitigated by local ordinances. I'm not anti-oil and gas, I'm pro-environment, and I don't know where those two can meet, but I think that that's where we're at. I also read the study that Eleanor Bravo brought up in front of you by the American Association for the Advancement of Science, published yesterday or the day before. Over 1 million babies looked at in Pennsylvania. From 2004 to 2013, 9 years. And they used some really complicated and very robust statistics to look at these babies. There's a real problem. there's little evidence for health effects at distances beyond 3 kilometers, suggesting that health impacts of fracking are evident within 3 kilometers. 9,842 feet. 9,842 feet. The ordinance before you requires setbacks of 750 feet. This number is entirely arbitrary. According to this new research, setbacks should be more like 7,500 feet. Children, this is babies in utero. But children too face quite different risks from air pollutants than adults. Their lungs are not fully grown until children become adults. Biological defenses that help adults fight off infections are still developing in young children. They are outside for longer periods. They are usually more active when outdoors. Consequently, they inhale more polluted outdoor air than adults do. It is critical to protect our air and water for our children and for our future. An ample margin of safety is necessary to protect our children. This is just one of the recommendations, setbacks, that I have in my health report to you. I hope that you will read the other ones because they're all very important. The commission has tolerated our comments, but there has been no action on actually representing your constituents. This is why so many of us are frustrated and even hostile towards you. If you care about us, I suggest a genuine effort for engagement. For example, a while ago I asked for a task force with citizens, including rural and tribal residents, public health experts, technical experts, and lawmakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. All in favor?
Excuse me. Good evening, Chairman Chapman, Commissioners, and I'd like to wish you all Merry Christmas. And I understand that a few of you have some heritage to wish you a Happy Hanukkah as well. So, what I came to talk about, I think, has been spoken about already, and that's the issue of the changes in the decibel level. And I think hopefully we'll get that resolved in some way, and hopefully we'll be able to push this into next year and consider.
Dr. Friedman,
yes.
Can you speak into the mic more, please?
Can you hear me better now? Thank you. I've been concerned about the process of this ordinance. We started on a normal process. Comments were made by the public, not always, I believe, listened to properly and listed properly by Director Springfield. But we got into a normal process of developing an ordinance, and all of a sudden, an ordinance was put in, we believe, from outside, from the oil and gas industry, and it took over the normal process that was happening. And then there were pushes by Chairman Chapman to get this thing done before it was ready. And then there were pushes to rush an ordinance that came out of planning and zoning with the decibel levels that we've been talking about, and then pushes to get it along without taking the time to get it right. So we need to take the time to get this ordinance right, and part of that, I think, is to take the time to listen to the New Mexico Tech study, which is going to look at the effects of modern drilling and producing techniques on aquifers. It's clearly written in the ordinance that was commissioned by our county. So I'm asking that we table this ordinance and get it right. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Name, right? No, name, right? That outside monitor paid off. There you go.
Yes. Okay.
Good evening.
Hi. All right.
Ma'am?
Yes? Okay, I don't know where to start. I went to Chaco Canyon 83 times. So I noticed.
Can you stop for a minute?
Sure.
Why don't you breathe,
Okay.
relax for a few seconds, we'll restart the clock for you.
Okay.
Introduce yourself.
Okay.
Do you need a bottle of water?
That'd be nice. Okay.
Can I ask where you came from?
Relaciones. So, my name is Dr. Lynn Wright. Anyway, okay. I've been to Chaco Canyon 83 times since 1985. And the reason why I bring this up to you is because I've been hiking to Penasco Blanco for all that time. There's a water spring there when we're in a drought. 5 years later, I was in a drought, walking in the same trail, and there's no water in the spring. And that's because the new Navajo plant took all the water. What I'm saying is that we live in a desert, and they're trying to frack our water. I called up Tom Udo's office because they fracked Chaco Canyon illegally 3 times. That's how much you can trust these guys. And so I called up Udo's office and I complained. And he said, well, the staffer said we've been fracked for 80 years. We've been fracked in New Mexico. Do you all know that? I didn't know that. It's a crime. We should all know that. Then last year, 100 elk died by drinking out of a water tank. The scientists say that's near Las Vegas, New Mexico. The scientists are stumped. Who are paying those scientists? Why are they stumped? It just infuriates me. Okay. The ingredients for the chemicals for the fracking is so toxic, they won't let us know what they are. I'm sure they have big words for them that we don't understand, but they're toxic. Okay, this one young man did a speech. He said he had 100 of the ingredients written down, and he was going to put down all the harm that they did. But he started doing 5 of them. It filled up 2 pages of toxic results. They cannot even touch aquatic life because it will just murder it. So I suspect that's probably what happened to those elk. So anyway, if the oil and gas companies were that caring and loving about us people, wouldn't they change to alternative energies? Why would they be doing something that harms the earth and murders people? And they have murdered people. If you don't believe me, read Gray Palace's book, Vulture's Picnic. Okay. Then, I don't know, every time there's an oil spill or radiation leaks or a meltdown of a nuclear plant or any of those things, there's always a media blackout. We don't know about it. Have you heard about Arkansas, Mayflower, Arkansas? Their pipes, oil pipes were 60 years old, and they were spewing tar sands down subdivisions, ditches, and they had blackout in media. So if the oil companies were so caring, they'd say, this land is too porous, we cannot drill here. We cannot frack here. Oklahoma will cause earthquakes, so we can't frack here. But they don't care. They don't care about you, they don't care about me, all they care about is money.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
That's right.
Alicia Ortega. I got ahead of myself there.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alicia Ortega. I'm from the Pueblos of Pewaukee and Santa Clara, and a lifelong resident of New Mexico ancestrally since time immemorial. And I want to address some issues. One, aside from the fact that there was no tribal consultation or input that went into the ordinance, considering our cultural resources, land, water, rights, and standards, when nearly half of Sandoval County land base is on tribal land. The even bigger picture here that will affect all residents, as you mentioned, you have a duty to all residents in Sandoval County. Well, this will affect all residents of New Mexico, is the effects that hydraulic fracturing will have on our water. And Chairman Chapman, I've heard you state several times now that the oil and gas industry is nothing new to Sandoval County and that fracking has been around since the 1940s. But what you failed to mention is the huge difference between conventional drilling, which is the vertical going straight down, and hydraulic fracking, which is associated with horizontal drilling, which in fact is completely new to Sandoval County and completely irresponsible given the geology of Sandoval County and the Albuquerque Basin aquifer from Cochiti on down south. And Chairman Chapman, as Commissioner Golden Rose stated earlier and quoted you as knowing nothing about the Albuquerque Basin, I just wanted to share a few things with you that the Mango Shale, where Thrust Energy is just waiting to drill, is dangerously close to the drinking water aquifers, and in doing so in such a heavily faulted basin with thousands of fractures can only result in one thing, and that is contamination and pollution of our drinking water. And as water flows down, this will directly affect everyone within and south of Sandoval County. As our water table is already so shallow to begin with, the risk of groundwater contamination is alarmingly high and detrimental to our surface, subsurface, and groundwater supply, which we all use. If this ordinance is not tabled tonight, it would be a blatant and total disregard to the health, welfare, and water of all of our residents of New Mexico on your part. All of whom, might I add, which are ready and standing to act as allies to do all that is necessary at the local, state, and federal levels to save our water unitedly. I don't think anybody wants to go into litigation, but I don't think that that's off the table. And right now we have 5 tribes and numerous organizations from all over the country suing President Trump over the 85% reduction to bears' ears. So I think that's where a lot of people are right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Block.
What is your background educational?
My background?
Yes.
I have a bachelor's degree in organizational management and 2 master's degrees in marketing and management of technology.
Let me just tell you one quick thing. You presented in a very professional way, in a very respectful way, and you presented your argument extremely well, and I just want to thank you for that. That was an outstanding presentation in 3 minutes. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Sonia Benson. You look like you need help. She asleep?
Hi. I would like to thank all of you for listening. I'm from the La Madera area, and so it's a 3-hour round trip for us, which is why not a lot of us have been out here. And we also learned about all of this in August. The day of the August meeting is when I learned about it. And so I would like for myself and my community to have input in this, which to me would mean tabling it for now so that we could be considered, because we're in a rural area, we're permissive use, we're not a municipality, we're not tribal land, we're not government land, and we would have no protection against air quality. The kids and I recently camped in Carlsbad, and no insult if anybody's from Artesia, but it stunk. We put up our windows, and I didn't know why at the time, but now I know that it was from hydrogen sulfide from the oil and gas industry down there. And it's not just the air is disgusting, the smell, but it turns out that it's toxic, it's harmful, and as somebody, there's not any, there wouldn't be any regulations for air quality, not where I'm at anyway. And there wouldn't be any regulations for checking the water. And if there are regulations, I don't think anybody does them. So what I would like to ask for is to be considered, to have a voice in this, because right now, the La Madera area where I live, my husband and I used our own hands, built our little straw bale house. Ironically, we're off the grid. We also have one volunteer fire department. It has one truck. So if there is a problem that comes up, and it's on a dirt road, I don't know, who's going to pay this company to, or who's going to pay the fire department to get up to speed for what they would need for an emergency. I heard the fire chief, Bernalillo or Rio Rancho, speak here, and perhaps they could handle something like that, but not in my area. So what you're looking at with the Heil Amendment and the Stoddard Ordinance leaves us vulnerable to all of that. And if nothing else, I would like to either have our area taken off of this, out of consideration, but if we're at oil and gas's bidding, then I would like to be considered. And thank you for your time.
Treme Cox. Thank you.
My name is Wendy Cox.
Why does that look like Treme to me? I'm sorry.
I heard my handwriting.
I apologize.
I don't know. Can you see this? Or
Do you want us to see it?
Yeah, I would like you to see it. Or
I think we can see it from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I put it up here in the front so I can. Thank you. My name is Wendy Cox. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Speak up, please.
Okay, I'll try. I'm coming to this a little bit late to the game. It does seem in a way that the train's already left the station, so my words might not be quite timely, but nonetheless, I have something to say. I imagine that each of you commissioners is facing very difficult decisions. Our fragile state of New Mexico, and these decisions are very critical. These are long-term decisions and complicated. I would like to suggest that you first think of yourselves as doctors, and the first of their credo, the first words of their credo is do no harm. I would like to present this board the industrial development in New Mexico's northwest corner of the San Juan Basin. As you can see, the number of gas wells is extensive, somewhere around 27,000. I'm not sure about that number, but I think that's a round number. Now these same companies want to expand gas extraction into Sandoval County and our beloved Rio Grande River Basin, where we have water. New Mexico has relied on fossil fuels for decades, coal, oil, and now natural gas. While the income from these sources has been welcome, New Mexico has and is paying a very high price. Anyone concerned, any of us who've lived and hiked around the mountains and valleys of New Mexico have seen damage from gold mines, Cuesta, Laguna, Legizi, Artesia, the list goes on. The damage from these extractive industries, spills, leaks, is permanent. Chemicals used for fracking are often secret, but we know they can include diesel fuel, arsenic, mercury, and known carcinogens. These are heavy metals that are forced permanently into our lands. They are not completely recoverable, not tracked, and rarely monitored. This is how our water is contaminated permanently. First, we do not need new drilling. Coal and free fall as an energy source, feared as a major cause of climate change and run off the market by cheaper natural gas. Oil is in such plentiful supply that America's net imports are at their lowest since 1970. This is from New York Times. Most of energy from these new wells are in excess of what we need, and companies are storing and exporting the reserves. Second, these same companies are subsidized by U.S. taxpayers. The elimination of these subsidies, which includes tax exemptions, rebates, price controls, trade restrictions, and limits on market access, is widely seen as one of the most effective ways of reducing global carbon emissions. In 2011, International Energy Association economists said the current $409 billion, equivalent of fossil fuels are encouraging wasteful use of energy, and that the cuts in the subsidies of the big policy team could help renewable energy cuts, more market share, reduce CO2 emissions. Can I just say one more quick thing?
Sure.
In 2017, U.S. Energy and Employment report prepared by Department of Energy shows that clean energy jobs are no doubt the engine that drives America's electric energy economy, outstripping the number of paychecks provided by the fossil fuel industry by at least 5 to 1. We do have a moral obligation to provide jobs for our citizens. This is where we should head. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Carolyn, Carolyn.
You turn that off.
You don't want any background music?
Right, exactly.
Gotcha. We'll get it
Good
shut
evening, all my relations. My name is Carolyn Houses. I'm Navajo and Taos Pueblo. I lived in the Albuquerque area for the past 12 years. I just also wanted to say that I liked what the director of Haven House had to say. I'm a social worker as well. I attended and saw the meetings in which Commissioner Holden Rhodes spoke. I wondered if there had been town halls in other districts with high indigenous populations. So I talked with a few of my friends from the Torreon, New Mexico area and asked if their commissioner had ever hosted town halls about this. They said they only recalled him coming out to speak about road issues. Therefore, I ask you, commissioners, have you hosted town halls within the communities, within your districts, within your districts? If not, how can you say you are the representative voice on behalf of your districts regarding this issue? Second is the reported correlation between murdered, missing Indigenous women and the man camps created by the resource extraction industries. Per a Dakota Times article, Gray Hermany Horses, former Rosebud Sioux tribal police chief, temporarily worked as a law enforcement officer in the Shale Rich area of the Bakken region in Newtown, North Dakota. She reported specific horrendous accounts in which indigenous men, women, and children suffered sexual abuse. And some have become among the missing and murdered. She indicated that there are certain 5 identifiable variables that remain constant among the oil workers of these man camps. One is that the workers know they live in a remote environment where law enforcement is stretched beyond the limits and the temptation towards criminal behavior is very strong. A United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples reported that on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, North Dakota, the epicenter of the Bakken shale oil boom, one of the largest sources for oil extraction in the United States, that the rates of violence against women at Fort Berthold had tripled, 243 rapes in 1 year. North Dakota now has the 8th highest incidence of rape in the United States. And what the earlier person said, the director of Haven House, she said Sandoval County is the #1 in the reported incidents of domestic violence. That's violence against women. Is Sandoval County ready for this? I don't think so. Amnesty International released a report last year calling for the national inquiry to specifically examine violence tied to resource development. I have requested a copy of this report, and I will submit it when I receive it. I think a research study about this is in New Mexico is overdue. Commissioners, will Sandoval County law enforcement have the resources and the capacity to address this impending threat as the estimated 15,000 wells dot the landscape? Also, if fracking proceeds in the northwest area of Sandoval County or anywhere near the 12 tribal indigenous nations, I think you are already aware that tribal law enforcement is already taxed beyond any reasonable limits. How will you work with the tribal nations to ensure that all people are adequately protected? The last point is about Greater Chaco, which I have ambiguously heard referred to as the northwest area of Sandoval County. In a New York Times article, B.B. Price stated, drilling in Chaco compromises the viability of a monument with vast spiritual importance for many Native people in our region. It's a form of corporate racism. This scarring and polluting of the land and air and night sky will all be done by companies with absolutely no accountability whatsoever. Whoops. At the heart of these disgusting acts is the idea that freedom is license, a license to do anything you want to do, even if you know that what you want to do is opposed by multitudes who see your irresponsible freedom as an act of hostility, not as an expression of liberty and enterprise. Commissioners, considering all that has been said by citizens and the sovereign tribal nations about this hastily drafted 9-page inadequate oil and gas ordinance, how can you pass it? Your constituents have not been consulted. How do you plan to address the human safety concerns regarding the man camps that will spring up to dangerously dot the landscape without adequate law enforcement? How will Chaco Canyon and the greater Chaco area be protected? How will you ensure that environmental justice is asserted when it appears that there is no equal protection under the law, especially when this ordinance is being steamrolled upon us to accept and endure? Thank you.
Thank you.
Young ladies, can you come back?
Sure.
First, I'd like to address a couple of things.
Sure.
I'm the commissioner for District 5. And I have attended tri-chapter meetings on, I don't know how many occasions already. I'm the only commissioner that voted no for this ordinance in the first place. Second, I sent Daniel Soul and his people to the planning and zoning meetings. They testified against the ordinance or the implement of the ordinance. So they have been consulted. Now, do I attend every chapter meeting? No, but I do attend all the tri-chapter meetings. That's 3 chapters, not 1. So one of the issues that I brought up very formally in the whole deal is of the roads that are torn up by the oil and gas industry, because the students of Cuba schools, Ojo Encino schools, Torreon, cannot get to school because the oil and gas industry tear up those roads on a daily basis whenever it rains or snows or anything like that. So they have been addressed in numerous issues. So they are getting listened to. Thank you.
Okay, may I respond to that? Thank you. I had to bring you up because this is what I heard response from the residents of Torreon County, or Torreon, New Mexico. And so I asked the question, has anybody else of these commissioners been out there? Because this is what I heard. I reported what I heard. And if you haven't, then you really, and I'm not saying you specifically, but if you haven't, you need to be out there to see your constituents. And doing it, asking us to look at it via live stream is not good, because in the rural areas, internet access is next to nothing. Thank you.
Edward, want to talk Taiwan with Zuni Pueblo? Here he comes. Evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thought I'd recognize the name.
Chair Chapman, commissioners.
Please speak up.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I want to open with the proposed amendment. By the way, my name is Edward Lee Maipiwa. Thank you. The county's draft oil and gas ordinance proposed amendment as Article 3 does not consider the threats to senior Federal Reserve water rights of pueblos and tribes that arise and exist outside proposed counties, use areas that will receive more or less notice about proposed oil and gas development. Pueblos and tribes in the United States must receive notice and the opportunity to comment on all requested permits under the county ordinance. So that's my comment to the IO amendment. But in general, I want to say that as a Zuni tribal member, our homeland includes the Greater Chaco region. Therefore, Zuni has interest in the lands, waters, and cultural resources in the Sandoval County, the Chaco region. Zuni, like the counties, has a power and responsibility to protect its sovereignty, economic integrity, and health and welfare of all life within the lands held since time immemorial. Zunis also must protect our waters that are senior Federal Reserve water rights and integral to our life here on Mother Earth, and also our ancient and continuing spiritual and cultural practices protected by federal and state laws. Zuni only recently has become aware of this proposed oil and gas ordinance that may authorize fracking or fracturing of underground formations to withdraw oil and gas using large blasts of water and chemicals. Zuni urges the county to conduct formal consultations with the pueblos and tribes in the county and surrounding areas and the United States as well, existing and proposed studies of the surface and groundwater hydrology in this region can be shared and coordinated before proceeding with the county draft ordinance. In closing, I note again in your draft ordinance no references to Pueblo or tribal governments who have federally recognized laws regarding water and other resources in your acknowledgments of applicable federal and state laws. This is an unfortunate oversight. Other major problems exist. But I want to thank you for this opportunity again, and I hope you continue to listen and entertain our comments. Good night.
All right, thank you, sir. Lee Fisher.
If I could wake my legs up.
They go numb on you?
Don't start your magic clock yet. I mean, you said that.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I have just a few comments this evening, and I would appreciate it if you gentlemen would stop texting, emailing, and Googling for the next 3 minutes while I provide them, please. First thing I want to do is go off my prepared remarks for a minute because, Mr. Chairman, you've made many statements over many meetings that I kind of taken issue with. I think they were mischaracterizations. But tonight you said something that is accurate and correct about our industry. Our industry has done a very, very good job in the state of New Mexico with oil and gas exploration and production. That's because our industry has not yet fracked in an area that's rampant with geologic faults that collectively constitute one gigantic rift. That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's the one area where I don't think you realize that you need to realize. Back to my prepared remarks. First, I'd like to publicly thank Commissioner Holden Rhodes for issuing his position paper. If anyone in the room has not received a copy of this document, I'd like to enter it in the record. I think it's already in there. I'd like to enter it again just for good measure. But if you haven't received a copy of this document, write down your email address on a piece of paper and give it to me, and I will gladly send it to you. I will also send you the article out of the Washington Post that was mentioned tonight regarding fracking sites that may indeed cause the risk of underweight babies. I've got that study here. I'm going to get that in there too. You guys should all read this. It's interesting stuff. Oh my goodness, everybody's getting tired up there. Okay. Forward we go. As I said before, I'll give that to anyone who'd like to have it. But Mr. Chairman, the paper that Commissioner Holden Rhodes wrote quotes your position and Mr. Springfield's position from last summer regarding the oil and gas ordinance as compared to quotes of your recent positions, which have changed rather dramatically for both of you for no obvious reasons. They're all direct quotes that are different as night and day. Maybe you could comment on that later in the meeting, because it's pretty hard to understand. The issues haven't changed at all, just your positions have changed. It's a classic flip-flop if ever there was one. It also sets the record straight on the New Mexico Tech study, paid for with $62,000 of our county funds, which you and Mr. Springfield summarily dismissed at the last meeting as being virtually irrelevant to this issue. Not so at all. So thank you, Commissioner Holden Rhodes, for setting the record straight by exposing these major and peculiar discrepancies. Also, let me mention that I have a highly recognized, indisputable fracking expert looking at the prospect of fracking performed amongst the numerous geological faults present throughout eastern Sandoval County, and his preliminary findings regarding the high potential for earthquakes have caused him considerable concern. He owns a major patent which revolutionized the fracking industry and technology, and he has personally fracked hundreds and hundreds of wells. He knows whereof he speaks, so stay tuned. There's more to come on this shortly. I'll skip the part about the high school auditorium because you already addressed that. But I do respectfully urge all of you commissioners to do the right thing, table this ordinance until the tech study has been completed and reviewed. We've paid for it, and we'd like it to be reviewed. That would also provide you with time to listen to a fracking expert, as well as to also have the opportunity to include our Native American neighbors in the process as well. They have not been included, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fisher. We're going to take a break. We will be back at the top of the hour, so everybody stretch your legs. We'll be back at 10 o'clock.